Catherine,
Hi.
thank you for taking the time to join me today. For anyone who doesn't know you, how do you describe yourself to a room full of people who don't know you?
Oh, like you said, there's a way to describe me, and then there's a way to describe what I do. I am first and foremost a mom, but I'm very fortunate. I've built my own business around mortgages, so I'm a mortgage agent. But I do my business a little different than everyone else's because I feel that even though I grew up with a bank manager in my house, I grew up with a lack of financial knowledge. Going to university, come out with a ton of debt, a degree that doesn't really get you anywhere. And I met a mortgage agent who completely transformed our life in 90 minutes because they looked at us and taught us so much, not just about mortgages, but about finances and how to improve our life. And I think the difference of success is just having the knowledge given to you. And we're so lucky with the internet now, we can connect with so many people so quickly. So that's kind of the premise of what I like to do is just share education and things I've learned along the way with other people. So hopefully it can potentially change their lives for the better because when you don't have to stress about money, the world's a completely different place for you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember what the lesson that stood out from you from that mortgage broker was?
Do you know what? He went in and looked at our application, which was not a good application. Like, let's be
Mhm.
clear, it wasn't, if we walked into a bank, they would have said, come back later, much
Right.
later. Um, and there were some blemishes on our credit. And he said, this is how you fix them. It's actually not that hard to fix them. Most people just think, oh my gosh, I'm stuck with bad credit. Um, and then they just accept the higher interest loans and they get in a vicious cycle that they almost can never get out of.
Hmm.
We had young kids at the time, and like we had a newborn and a toddler. And he said, have you already signed up for the RESP? There's free government money. You don't even have to contribute really, and you get 500 per year per child. So right away there. And then he talked about life insurance and really life insurance is a very complicated topic. And he's like, just get the cheap stuff for the most amount of money when you're young for the longest amount of time. And so term life insurance, and he told us why it's better than mortgage insurance, which is the opposite of what most mortgage professionals will tell you, because they just want to sell a product and make money and profit from you. They told us how our income changing what we do would affect our taxes, how to, we utilized a first time homebuyer program, but in a very creative way that decreased our income taxes, increased our down payment, and just kind of solved a lot of problems we had.
Yeah.
And
Well,
this was all in a 90-minute interview. And honestly, we went out with an action plan. We didn't get a pre-approval, but we went out with an action plan to change our finances, and we didn't have to go digging down a rabbit hole of figuring it out on our own.
hmm
Someone who deals with it every day just took the hour to say, hey, go do this, and this. And it's information from so many different areas of finance that we would never have been able to gather that much information to fix everything that quickly. So it really propelled us forward a lot faster and let us buy a home sooner than we would have otherwise.
hmm
And then, of course, real estate's a long game. The sooner you're in the door, the sooner you can start earning equity, right? And that's benefits people in the long term, right? So it's just trying to help people get ahead by having the information they need.
Right.
Um, yeah, because finances are different for everyone. If I looked at 100 people's applications, I would have 100 completely different action plans for them. So
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I find people have a hard time with is just knowing that action plan, finding the place to start versus going to, if you have multiple blemishes or multiple things you need to correct on your application or the pre-approval,
yeah.
then you've got to find what six people or 10 people to talk to and how do I do this and what's priority number one versus it sounds like he was more of a like financial advisor across a lot of different breadths of finance and it's like do this and this and that'll help you down the long run. So that's
Yeah.
really kind of leads into my next question of just talking about how you got into real estate and what drew you into the business yourself.
Well, that was it, that
Yeah.
meeting. Um, I had just graduated university. I was very fortunate. I came into a bit of money that was supposed to pay off my student loans. It was from my dad. It was supposed to pay off my student loans. I worked as a waitress. Again, I had a newborn and we had a 2-year-old. Um, I had a degree in kinesiology, which the designation kinesiology wasn't really around then. So kinesiology was not a degree that really landed you a job. It was a
Yeah.
segue to take further education. Um, I was fortunate. I was offered a job with the London Lightning and the Knights, but both of like to apply for them, but both of those were positions that you work
Yeah.
a
You're
excessive
away.
amount. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
wouldn't have helped me in my role as a mom. And my partner at the time had a union job that was very sporadic. Just really everything was everywhere. And that meeting changed me so much and just was so helpful that I went back to him and I said, how do I do this?
Mm.
Um, and it's actually a really interesting career path too. It's a very easy barrier to entry. It's really just one course. They are continually increasing the barrier to entry, but it's just one course, but it's mainly learning on the job. The course itself doesn't really give you all the information you need to be a mortgage broker. So just every application, I just absorbed like a sponge, everyone. So even if I had to advise you something on your credit, and maybe I didn't know, I would go research it because now I know that. Or if I saw a young couple doing really well, often I would just ask them, like, hey, what do you invest in? What
Yeah.
led you to this path? And so almost interviewing every person, just like you do, gives everyone, you gather all the knowledge from so many different people.
Yeah. You funnel it in from the people who are actually doing it instead of trying to Google, like, first of all, figure out what to Google. And then
Yeah.
second of all, how to distill through all the bullshit that you just find people that are trying to sell you stuff. Like you said, with the life insurance and,
Yes.
people and whatever, rightfully so. Everybody's in a business trying to make a business, but not everybody's trying to help you. So,
Well, actually, like talking about credit, because credit's really, I think, the foundation of everything.
mm,
Um, One, I'm so fortunate I got to go talk to many high schools about credit, which is just great that teachers have invited me to go in. But really, there's not a profession to help people with credit. The only ones that do are trustees who
mm,
benefit by you filing for bankruptcy or a consumer proposal, which isn't always the best, or credit counseling, which honestly, showing up on people's credit bureau can certain lenders look at it almost like a bankruptcy. So there's no person to go to. There's not an
yeah.
advisor. There's not one
Until there's
person.
a ding on it already, then you're
Yeah,
already in the system.
but there's not a person who's supposed to teach you about credit, and it's one of the cores of your life that if you take care of it, it will make your life easier. But it's really crazy that this system, this one score that dictates honestly the cost you will have, your ability to borrow money, your ability to get housing. Even right now, landlords are very strict. The application to rent is really tough, and they run a credit score. So this one score that can affect so many areas of your life, we're not taught about. There's not someone we
Mm,
can call and ask questions about. And it's a very complicated algorithm. So it's not an easy fit for people to understand the solution. So I think just anyone who can help spread awareness of how to take care of your credit, how to build it or rebuild it, because most of us are in the rebuild phase. So many people, if you care about credit, you've probably hit some road bumps
had an
along the
issue,
way.
yeah.
So yeah, and
Right.
it's just not talked about enough. It's not a topic that a lot of people like to talk about. So um, having that information and being able to share that, that's really awesome. Like I'd love to do that.
Yeah, well, one of the things I really admire about you is how it's a lot of education based information, like your information sharing and suggesting, like, here's a hurdle that's very common, and here are some ways to deal with it, or here are some ways to actually just step by step go about getting around it and improving it. And you said it seems very useful. It's not a market that I'm in myself, and so I don't have a good gauge on how applicable it is, but I'm assuming it is because it seems like a lot of people are like, "Thank you." And so that is that a common theme you find across a lot of your clients is just a lot of focus on credit building and the importance of that?
Yeah, and sometimes, on social media, you're kind of supposed to have like a niche or a niche about what you talk about. And
Mm,
most people, let's say if they're in mortgages, they talk just about mortgages. But again, it goes back to there are so many things people can do in their life, whether they're business owners, how they file their taxes, how they report, how they do their bookkeeping, credit, this, how they even employees, you can negotiate, you might get paid in different pay structures, and that can affect you. And even if your end goal is not to buy a house, I find a lot of people follow me just because of the educational content, right? And it is applicable to people who maybe aren't buying a house. And honestly, right now in today's market, buying a house isn't the right choice for everyone. Like it's really not. The cost of interest right now and mortgages, it's very expensive.
mm,
And it's not the right decision for everyone right now. So it's nice to be able to share information, whether their end game is to buy a house or not buy a house. I just like to help people no matter if they end up working with me or not. If
right.
I'm able to give education that betters someone's life, like that's really the win.
With that interest rate in mind, like one thing that I hear from people just at work and out and around is like the rates are obviously significantly higher than 5 years ago, and a
Mhm.
lot of people are up for renewal. And some of the content I see you post are just how to navigate that transition or that renewal process. Um, do you have any common suggestions that you have for people, or is there something that you found super helpful for a lot of people that are at that renewal process dealing with the interest rate change?
So to be fair, we were very spoiled for a very long time with low
Sure.
interest rates. Now, when you hear 2% or 3% or 4%, those numbers actually all seem really small. So it's a lot of people don't really comprehend how that changes because when you hear just 1% increase, you don't really understand how that might affect you. But when you have a mortgage with an interest rate of the sweet spot I find is around 2.75, you're paying about half of your payment goes to interest and half goes to principal when you get that mortgage chart. It changes throughout. It more goes to principal as you go, but it doesn't
Sure.
change too significantly over the 5 years. When I had clients this year who have a 5% mortgage, which it still seems it's a single digit, sounds low, and less than a quarter of their payment every month goes towards principal.
Mhm.
So it's almost like they're renting again because such a big portion is going to interest. It's just
Yeah.
going to the fact they're borrowing. So I find a lot of people say their interest rate was 2% and it's going to 4%. So it's doubling. Your payment doesn't double. So
No.
it doesn't necessarily go up as much as people think. And you have to remember if you've had a nice interest rate for 5 years, you were able to pay down so much more equity in your home. So you did really win. And we were at historical interest rate lows.
Right.
The market we're in right now is actually, although we're in high inflation, this interest rate is closer to the average over time, but we were just very spoiled with low interest rates. But I think a lot of people are needing to adjust their spending habits.
Right.
Obviously, they realize that we were spoiled and more of their income should go towards this. The Canadian government has what's called a stress test. So when I pre-approve you for a mortgage, even during COVID and we had 1%, 1.89% interest rates, I actually qualified you based on the interest rate being 5.25. So, um, so we were almost preparing to make sure your income could handle this. It's not a perfect system, but if you're coming up for renewal, you can ask someone to tell you what your payments will be. Ask it ahead of time. And so you have time to adjust and say, really, can I afford that payment?
Right.
If you can't, doesn't mean you have to sell your house. If you can't, there's options. If you just sign your renewal paper and you had a 25-year mortgage, now you're at 20 years, that loan is cast over 20 years. You can spread that back out. Maybe you put it back to 30 years and you don't have to start all over for 30 years. Maybe you plan on retiring in 25, but for the next 5 years, keep it cast at 30 years so your payment's affordable. And when
Right.
interest rates stabilize a bit more, then maybe recast it back to 20 years. So you have options there because the further you spread it out, the lower your payments will become. Or
Yeah.
maybe tap in. This isn't a perfect recommendation for everyone, but some people, it's a good opportunity to maybe tap into a little bit of their equity, put it away in emergency fund. So if they find, maybe if their career is affected by the current market conditions, they know they have a little nest egg to help them with payments if their employment and their income was to be affected.
Mm.
Um, and then if they don't use it, great, we'll just put it back on the principal later. And yeah, there's a cost to doing that, but sometimes having that safety net there is worth a little bit of cost.
Yeah, the peace of mind is at least you're not stressed about money for the next 5 years. And as you said, I feel like the 80s had interest rates into like 18. For some reason, I have that in my mind, 15 and 18%.
You're right on.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people potentially overextended themselves a little bit and whatever that's called, like mortgage broke, right?
Yeah.
It's the when the interest rates were low, the cost of buying a house wasn't necessarily low. And so you're entering a market at a higher price point with a lower interest rate with less room to play. Whereas if you would have bought, you know, a $400,000 home versus a $700,000 home, the double interest rate, I mean, your payment still goes up, but you're not as extended on your budget.
No, and I think the media incites a lot of fear in people,
Yeah.
and really, we should never be the gurus, the financial gurus, to never do what the masses are doing. So during COVID, everyone was fearful that almost they would never be able to afford a house again. The prices were like, they were
Yeah.
going so fast.
Yeah.
I saw a really good skit online where a gentleman's like, this apple's $5 and there's an auction. Everyone wants to buy this apple. And he's like, why is anyone paying $5 for an apple? And by the end, he's like, I'll pay 300 for the apple. That's how it felt. Everyone was just blindly wanting to buy a house at these outrageous prices. They were going in without financing conditions, which is so risky. They were going in without home inspections. We've heard of
Yeah. No
people,
inspections.
yeah, and home inspections, $400 that can save you a half a million, a million. It's insane. It's worth it. But there was just such a fear that nobody would be able to buy homes ever again.
Mm.
Like you would just, the prices kept going up. So now in the last year, everybody, there was almost a fear, do not get a mortgage right now. Um, but there was so much opportunity in the housing market. You can get a single family house for less than 400,000. There's quite a few on the market in London,
Mm.
um, for 400,000 right now. Some great deals, but a lot of people will say, don't get it, the interest rates are too high. But I
Yeah.
would rather buy low, get a high interest rate, and if rates drop, I would just refinance and take advantage of the lower rate at that time. You have a lower
Right.
down payment, you paid less for the house, probably 200,000 less, some houses. So I think that's everybody just follows a lot of what the media says. And it's not the right advice for everyone. But my advice to everyone is it's housing, it's important. It is a long-term investment that can benefit you widely, but you have to take into account, can I afford this?
Hmm.
If what are some strategies to make sure I'm in a position that I don't put myself in a financial pickle down the road? Um, and how are ways we can mitigate that if that happens? So I think everybody just needs to really not worry about what everyone else is doing. Look at their own situation. What is best for it? It might be renting, it might be buying, it might be buying with someone else as a partnership to kind of get you both into the housing market so you can build up a little equity and go your separate ways after.
Mm.
Um, it might be buying a rental property. It might not be buying a rental property, but everyone's situation is so unique. One strategy does not fit all for anyone in the housing or the interest rate game right now.
Now, is there like a group or is there some sort of a way to connect with people like that? Like in my mind, that sounds like we want to buy a house and we can't do it on our own. So let's just gather people who are also in a similar boat to try and do this. Does that exist?
It doesn't, I believe there probably does.
Mm.
I know there's a couple programs in the States where it's almost like buying stocks and you buy
Right.
stocks in a specific property. I don't know the ins and outs of it. I believe it was headed by Ryan Pineda. Um, and there was a wait list to get in to find
Sure.
out the information. I find it's like anything. Um, I would almost not want to do it with a group, because real estate's harder to liquidate than a stock.
Yeah.
And they may not want to sell. Everybody's financial situation again changes and it fluctuates. So while you might need to access your equity and get out, they may not. So what I recommend is I think buying with friends is not a horrible idea,
Mm,
but like anything, definitely go in with an agreement in place. I am typically the bearer of bad news, or I'm the
yeah.
Debbie Downer when I'm pre-approving a young couple, especially if they're not married. And often the down payment might be coming from Sally's parents, but Joe there is coming in, but Joe might be making more of the payments because Joe
Yeah.
has a higher paying job. Well, let's say that relationship dissolves in 3 years. How is that going to look? And it's better to come up with an agreement in place, whether you're friends or family or a couple, come up with an agreement in place while you like each other.
Yeah.
Not when you don't like each other and you are going to have to involve lawyers and it's going to be expensive, or you're going to be mean and not fair to the other person. Come
Yeah.
up with an agreement, and it's called a cohabitation agreement. And most real estate lawyers will do one really cheap and really easy way to just allow that partnership to come together so you can buy something together, but also have a clause how to deal with it if that relationship dissolves.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
saw you did a post about that recently. Anyways, I just watched it this morning and I was doing a little bit of catching up on things. But
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, honestly, because it's in any context, having that conversation ahead of time is the option, right? When two emotional people very
Yes.
rarely ever get any progress in any sort of a disagreement. And so when the emotions are high, having that in place already, that's just, or like, let's say you do have a financial emergency and you need to exit, and
Yeah.
like, that's too bad. It's not in the agreement. At least it's like, well, yeah, I signed it, so you can take accountability for it, or
Yeah.
potentially, not that everybody does, but
And another thing that have recommended in the past, because some people have parents who might have a house with some equity in it, and they could potentially lend them the down payment. But some parents are really excited to help their parent or children. Some people aren't. Like
yeah,
it, but one thing I've recommended is instead of you lending them the down payment and just expecting it to come back down the road, especially if that's not something you feel is right for you, or they're not as excited about maybe lending out 25,000 of their money, which they could be earning more money on it elsewhere.
right,
Then in let's put mom and dad on your mortgage application. Let's come up with an agreement that they own a percentage of the home too. So maybe in 5 years, whatever the growth in equity is, 25% of it is mom and dad's. So it helps mom and dad grow their investment. They're not taking a loss, because again, finances are personal. So that might be really important to them, is not to take a loss, to invest smart, but they can also help their children break into the housing market.
hmm,
So it's win-win. So there's different ways to look at it too, but we definitely saw an increase in applications and parents going on. I've seen applications. A lot of our systems really only like 4 people on the system, the computer systems we use, but we've
right,
seen some with more this year. Friends going in on rental properties to buy them together.
right,
Um, yeah, I've seen a couple different scenarios, and I think it was nice to see people coming together to help each other financially, because it was definitely a very difficult few years for people, whether it was the cost of housing going up or the interest rate and inflation.
hmm,
And also some people were really affected employment wise.
yeah,
COVID wasn't great to anyone.
yeah. The
Most
psycho
people,
emotional effects are, well, I mean, they'll
yeah.
be going on for a while.
And a lot of people who may have thought they had a very stable career, let's say a registered nurse, they went to school for 4 years for that. They went, and if they came down and they chose not to get the vaccine, they've just lost an entire career.
Hmm.
So it just shows that life isn't as stable as we think. So the better we can prepare financially, I think I think a lot of people are starting to look at their long-term financial forecast
Right.
as opposed to right in front of them.
This do you or from what I understand, later this month the central bank has a meeting discussing interest rates.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on how that's going to go? And is there any predictors? I mean, obviously not until it happens, but what advice have you been giving to your clients coming into Q1 with that meeting on the books?
Well, we have a lot of meetings.
Okay.
And to be honest, yeah, there's quite a few per year. And before COVID, those were not dates we wrote in our calendar because
Right.
it was rare there was actually a big announcement. During COVID, the central interest rate typically dictates variable interest rate
Hmm.
mortgages. Variable rate interest is not the big interest rate right now. It's not the big mortgage that everyone's taking. But as we're going into more of a decreasing rate environment or about to enter it, variable rate mortgages will become more popular again. Um, so the variable interest rate and what the bank is announcing is heavily dictated by inflation and the inflation numbers that come out. It's also dictated by the employment numbers. Um, it kind of goes backwards. They If we see job growth in Canada, that means that companies are thriving
Hmm.
and we have more jobs to give, which means they are not heavily affected by these high interest rates. So that's typically good job growth would be more with a rate increase.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors. It's very multifaceted. We saw no movement in December. We I I think it's a little too optimistic to hope for a rate cut. We can all hope for one, but I think it's a little too optimistic to really bet on it. Although some economists are saying there's about a 60% chance of a rate cut. If we saw a rate cut, I think it would only be a quarter point.
Mm.
Um, the states, though, a lot of our numbers do heavily follow the state's trends. Although there's a lot of other factors and they make their own decision separate from the states. The states is predicting large rate decreases this year.
Okay.
They're also going into a presidential election, so they want to keep everyone happy.
Yeah. Bring people back on board.
Yeah, so this I believe we won't see a rate announcement, like an increase or a decrease. That's my prediction. If we see a decrease, great. I think it would be very unwise for them to increase it. And just based on current numbers that have gone out about inflation. For most people hear the word inflation this year. It's thrown around a lot. Um, I don't think a lot of people really understand what inflation is, so I'm just going to explain it in the most I use very simple analogies for
Please
everything
do.
because
That's great for
that's
me
how
too.
I work.
Yeah. Good.
So it's like a basket. So if you went shopping and you had a basket of core things a family in Canada needs, they have a loaf of bread, milk. They put beer in it. I think I don't know if they've added weed, but anyways, they have that. They have a
Sure.
transportation cost, gas, a housing cost. So it's kind of like a basket of essential things they need. And then they compare the cost of those same products every month. And if
Right.
it's gone up, inflation's gone up. If the price has gone down, inflation's gone down. And then there's certain things they consider core, like very core, and those go into the core inflation numbers that they really track. Now, when you think about your expenses, housing typically is the biggest piece of the pie, right?
Right.
So right now, although inflation numbers are kind of trickling down, you have to think our housing costs have gone crazy up. So now, even though everything else is coming down, it still isn't going to come down that fast because now we have these astronomical interest rates affecting everyone's mortgage costs,
Yeah.
which affected rent. So, housing, it's almost cyclical. Like, although we want inflation to come down, the high interest rates they gave us are still negatively affecting the inflation.
Yeah.
But the announcement is typically for variable clients, and honestly, most of the people who are still in a variable rate are in a position now, they're like, we've decided we're in it for the long term. We are weathering the storm.
Yeah, we're gonna ride the
Um,
variable rate.
yeah, fixed rates don't directly follow this. There's different factors, but they're following somewhat of a trend. Typically right now, like we saw rates go up, so fixed rates went up.
Right.
But I don't think too many people out there um are in a position that they're still in a variable
Mm,
and stressed. I think most of them will see no rate increase.
right.
Um, yeah, but the other thing is a lot of people have variable loans that are not mortgages. So it affects student loans. All student loans are typically
Sure.
variable. Um, so there's other loans that get affected too, but I think we'll see no change in my opinion. I do think we'll see rate decreases this year. Um, I would like to think we're going to see a full percent. That's just my personal prediction. And every economist is thinks differently. And if we learned anything from the last few years, is the economists are not always right.
Yeah,
Actually,
who
pretty,
knows?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
they're like the next
anyone's
version of
guess,
weathermen.
that's it.
Yeah.
Anyone's guess goes right now.
Yeah. Well, there's no, you can say whatever you want in January, and then in July you'll find out. Like maybe it'll
Um,
rain, maybe it won't, maybe it'll snow, maybe it,
That's
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Well, I learned more about economics in the last 2 years than I really knew, and honestly, I think a lot of people in our industry learned too because they didn't realize how things are connected.
Hmm.
But no matter what happens in Canada, we are so heavily affected by global events. When you think of China, and we had a backlog of production for a while, the shipping container situation, the
Yeah.
war in Ukraine. What happens in the States with their election will trickle back into our country. Like Trump put in some tariffs that affected our trading ability at that time. So everything else, it doesn't matter what we're doing in Canada, there's so many other factors that are affecting it. But I just worry about your own cost of living.
Yeah.
Try to decrease expenses, try to increase income. It's you just have to worry about yourself in that situation.
And that, yeah, that equation hasn't changed really ever, right?
Yeah,
Worry about
exactly.
yourself, worry about the input, worry about the outputs. Those are the variables you have any sense of control about anyways. So
That's right. And honestly, like worrying's like a rocking chair. It's something to do, but it gets you nowhere.
yeah, that's right.
So just prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and like if they have any questions about finances, just ask.
Right.
I would just say if anyone is out there with a mortgage, stressed, ask your lender, but also maybe ask like a broker who has
Mm,
a third party view. Remember lenders at the banks only sell that bank's products. Among the top banks, like TD and Scotia's product lineup, extremely different. And getting approved, you may not get approved at one lender and approved at another lender. And it's still great rates. So a lot of people, I think they hear they're declined, or one lender won't do something for them. But
mhm.
really, it's just a walk down the street. But you might as well work with a broker who knows everyone's rules and can just tell you with a one-stop shop.
Yeah, I mean, you to bring it back to the start of the conversation, you're that guy that gives you the information about all the different pieces of the puzzle and like has a better overarching view of them all, right? It's to
Yeah.
actually give good advice.
Exactly. And we're licensed professionals. If you work at the bank doing mortgages, you're not licensed. You're an employee of the bank.
Right.
So we're licensed with the province of Ontario, the Financial Commission office. So they do background checks on us. We have to do continuing education each year. They've recently made mortgage agents into 2 different levels. So if you do private mortgages, you have to do more continuing education. I
Mhm.
do a lot of creative financing, private mortgages, alternative mortgages. I love knowing the creative solution. So I have that designation.
Mm,
And so I think it's worth it to go make sure you are working with the professional who can help you, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and in kind of taking a hard left turn, but shifting into that more personal view of you. One of the questions I like to ask everybody is, how do you describe your relationship with death? And
With
as a follow-up, have you ever had a near-death experience yourself?
um, my relationship with death would be I haven't really lost many people. So we lost a couple young kids in our high school when we were young.
Mm,
But I haven't really lost anyone before that. Um, I have seen people die, um, which for me, I don't know, it's just a weird thing to talk about. It was a car accident we saw. It was
right.
um not great. But I don't know. I myself near death experiences. Oh, sometimes I wonder how I made it out of my
Sure.
20s alive. But
Sure. Well, the
but
self-induced.
yeah, but I don't think anything
Mm,
traumatic. I never really sometimes I didn't cry at funerals like other people. I felt like
right.
a little numb, but as I get older, I am more fearful of death.
Mm,
My grandfather's the closest person in my life to me and probably the biggest influence on my life. And as he ages, he's the only person I've had nightmares about him passing away.
sure.
And I remember when we danced at my wedding together, and he said, aging is such a horrible thing. This is what we were doing through the father-daughter like
Right.
dance. He's like, aging is such a horrible thing. He's like, just enjoy. I think he's because he's at the point where it's affecting his health and
Yeah.
capability. He's like, enjoy every moment. And as I get older, I'm more fearful of death. For example, I used to box. We know that.
Yeah.
And I know there was an opportunity, or it may still exist for me to join a competition this year, but for me, I don't know if that's worth it for me.
Mm,
My health's really important. But on that same note, it's less of a fear, but also realizing my time is limited. And so I'm excited to pivot and move in different directions and optimize life and enjoy it.
right.
Um, not dwell on things as much. You know what? Things are going to change, relationships change, and you can dwell on it, or you can be excited that you get another chapter in life and
Hmm.
it can take a whole different turn. Our lives can take a whole different
Yeah.
road at any
Well, and to
time.
speak on, it's interesting too. Like one of the ways, or really the way I've always seen life, is that not everybody gets to grow old. And so when
Yes.
I hear people talk about,
Yep.
oh, it sucks growing old, and I don't like, the body does this and that. It's like, well, there's literally an alternative, and I'd rather,
I like that.
you know, but I've really lived my whole life fighting to stay alive, right against
Yeah.
the odds. You're probably not going to live. Like, okay, well, let's find out. And then it's
Yeah.
just like, well, I'm still here now, and so
Yeah.
whether I get to be old and broken, like I'm already kind of working through things, right? So like, I don't know, man, there's worse things. But it's
Yeah.
interesting just to hear that, and that's actually one of the reasons I'd like to get into some time at a hospice is to talk to more people closer to end of life,
Yeah.
was to try to draw those, I don't know, to give me a better sense of the full spectrum of life from an earlier time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It would be so interesting. And so it would be really interesting to see that too.
yeah. It's and
Um,
to see if some, I feel like there's kind of a split of excitement versus fear too. Like some people I know are ready to go. It's like I've lived a good life, and
yeah.
now is my time. And other people, that's just not the case. And I don't know. I don't know. There's any really correlation to pull from that, other than just very interesting to me.
It is. And I hope that I would live my life and continue to in a way that, say, you are in a horrible accident and you can tell you are not going to make it out of that wreck, that you can lay there with yourself and say, you know what, I did live a good life and I did the
Yeah.
best I can and I lived it to the fullest. So,
Well, and that's, yeah, I guess one of the lenses I like to look through too is just being aware of what version of myself I am in the world. Is that something that you find yourself thinking about much as well? Like, who am I being in the situation, and who do I want to be? Like moving forward, I think of trajectory and where am I going? What are my choices today saying about my future self? that I am going to become.
I definitely think, oh, sorry. I definitely think about that a lot. This year was a big year for me of, I guess, self-reflection.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, just
Yeah,
really thinking about, again, you're handed a circumstance and you can be the victim, you can give self-pity, or you can show up differently. And for me, honestly, it made me start realizing to live in the now, not to live in the future or the past as much. It's not perfect. It's definitely a practice.
for sure.
But I find, but again, that also might have been something that came with age too. I'm not
Mhm.
sure. Maturity, and also seeing a lot of people struggle last couple of years, like you see them through work struggle. Um, and just families going through so many, I think we all saw people go through so many different changes over the last few years.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I just really want to, again, live in the now, say no to things that are not serving me.
Hmm.
Also, I'm a chronic people pleaser, and honestly, I will volunteer to do things that nobody asked me to do, that
Yeah.
nobody might even need them to do. And I just further deplete my own energy from what I put
Overextension,
myself.
for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm so guilty of that. Um, so I think this year is just, again, focusing on the now, focusing on just being happy. Um,
Yeah.
Right, not maybe not always happy, just enjoying what life gives you. Like, there's a
Hmm.
full spectrum of emotions it gives you,
It's
but
kind of fulfilled, right? I find happiness is kind of that momentary zoomed in view, but the zoomed out view is really the sense of your life, right? It's more less about happiness, it's more about it for me, excitement and fulfillment and purpose and these different, like, do I really care about being happy? Not really. It's
yeah,
because I know it will be a byproduct of living according to my value structure and living within the principles that I feel as myself as a man that's ties straight to my value system and how I act in the world and these kinds of things. I know that if I'm able to embody that to the best of my ability, happy will be a byproduct
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
But then it sets the expectations, right? It's like I'm not expecting to be happy all the time, all
yeah.
day, every day. I don't think that's the point. And to
No,
tie back into another thought is I feel like contraction always precedes expansion. And this last couple of years have been a huge time of contraction in so many ways for so many people. And like I get excited because I'm like, I know coming out of contraction is expansion every single time.
yeah,
And like it's like winding up the coil, it's gonna let go. Like I don't know what's
yes,
gonna happen, but the version of you soon, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, the new version of you is just going to be so fucking awesome. Like you won't even recognize yourself.
yeah. I love that. I love that so much. And honestly, this year, I felt that. There were a couple times I was like, when you think you've already hit the bottom, and then it
Yeah.
just keeps going, and the
You
hard
continue
times keep
contracting.
coming.
Yeah.
I'm honestly, I'm like I kind of have this dialogue and like with God or whoever, almost now it's joking. I'm like, another one? You're just gonna do another one?
Yeah.
But I think too, I love how you said, I don't know where I'm gonna like go or what it will end up or what it will look like, but I'm excited. And I think when I was younger, or even not that much younger, I had to know. I had to be in control of that. And I think that almost took away from the joy of life, right? You don't
Hmm.
know. And if you're trying to control the outcome every time, you're taking away from the beauty of the ride, right?
Yeah.
So, um, and I think really it is. Believe in God or people believe in fate. But we come into so many connections with so many people all the time. Like you and I met not directly.
Yeah.
Um, and I got to learn more about you and we continue to learn more about each other. And like I'm always amazed by you, but it's just the way the world works. You get so many connections and it's about it's connecting with someone might change your trajectory and where you end
Yeah.
up or the opportunity, and it's might not be what you planned, but it's exciting and it's beautiful.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's one of the things that's come up for me a lot in the last 2 weeks is this idea that rigid things tend to break.
Oh, I
And
like
as you're
that.
talking about control, it's like and it's the lens I see the gym through for most people. The gym is a vehicle of control in life.
Yeah.
And so that's great. But we really never have actually control over anything. And so it's all just perception based. Right? It's like, I want to feel in control. Like, well, what for? Right? It's because I feel like I'm not in control. It's like, okay, well, what does that feel like? And you kind of pull that thread, and usually you find something else. It's like you don't really care about being in control. The thing you care about feeling anxious all the time, right?
Yeah.
There's this, and not just for an example, right? But
Yes.
it's that sense of rigidity keeps you in that sense of contraction, and then the expansion is delayed, and then you
Yes.
just
Completely.
you continue to feel stressed for longer instead of just we're along for the ride. Let's
Yeah.
find out. Shift into curiosity and like
Completely.
genuinely curious because I have no idea, right? How many days do you wake up? You think, fuck, I didn't see that coming at all.
No,
Good,
so
bad,
much.
whatever. It's like, this is just fucking wild,
Exactly. And
right? I love it.
honestly, I just did my business planning.
Mm,
Um, and often when you're business planning, you want to do the funnel. You want to look at what you want your business to look like in 10 years, 5 years, and then
sure.
you can scale it down to your actionable tasks you should be doing monthly, weekly, etc. Um, and I find business plans lately, when we talk about it, we're more likely to incorporate personal goals as well because I think most entrepreneurs are realizing it's not a balance. They're just intertwined and you
Yeah.
might as well grow them as one vehicle. It's just one. My business is a part of my life.
Yeah.
But I want it to be in a way that allows me to be a great mom and allows me to do other things. So looking at it that way. But when I was looking at my 10 and 5 year, this business planning, I found I almost couldn't see anything. Like I can guess from a numbers perspective or perhaps from a personal, but really I didn't know what I wanted it to look like because I'm at such a point of change in my life. But that didn't scare me for once. It was more exciting because really I have no idea of what my life will look like in
Yeah.
5 years. Or again, if I'm blessed to have 5 years, right? And it was more exciting than scary, which I think is good when you're able to sit back
Yeah.
and let go of the control and let what's going to happen and just do the best of your ability. Um, like you can't totally let go of the reins. And I think
No,
good
well,
things
there's a
happen
difference between
then.
passivity, right? You don't, it's not to be a passive
Yeah,
passenger in your life. It's just a matter of you're not the car,
no,
right? You can be the driver, but the wheels are turning on their own. You're not the one beating your heart and thinking in your brain, right? All that shit happens
exactly.
anyway. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Um, one thing this year too, I found I leaned into a bit more, which is kind of a different topic, is kind of trusting my own intuition, which I
mhm,
don't think I really trusted it for a while. And I think, especially as a woman, I feel like it's a superpower that we have such strong intuition. It's crazy the amount of times we just have a bad feeling about something, or maybe
yeah,
even a good feeling. And if you just lean into that, I feel like that itself is kind of like a road. And for work, different moves that I've made work wise this year, personal, friendship, just kind of leaning into it. And I find every time I trust that, it normally ends up good. If I'm like,
yeah,
this is a good person, align yourself with this person. You know what? Go out on a limb, ask, and I'm really focusing on strengthening my female relationships and my bonds with girlfriends, or maybe girls who inspire me or women who inspire me who I don't know, and just reaching out to them and trying to connect with them.
yeah,
And it's worked out so well. But I think really that intuition is such a guiding compass for that car, that some of us don't rely on often.
yeah. No, I think that's great. Like that's your intuition is whether it's higher self or that's the voice of God, right? There's so whatever the definition of it is, it comes from somewhere
Yeah,
and you're the one that hears it, right? And
exactly.
more times than not, when we ignore it, maybe not something bad, but definitely something good doesn't happen, right? It's
Ex-
kind of like, oh man, I
Or
remember
you're
the
turning,
moment, right?
yeah, or
Yeah,
you're turning your eye to something that's
yeah,
happening, but you don't want to see. But why turn your eye away from it and let that just continue to happen, right?
yeah. You
So,
just prolong it.
yeah, exactly.
No, on that kind of similar note, like on a personal level. what projects or passions are you leaning into lately? You mentioned you're connecting with more girlfriends and potentially stepping not away from boxing, but not into boxing.
Yeah,
So
not leaning into box.
how have you been able to incorporate like your passions into your busy schedule?
Um, Funny you say about busy schedule. It is busy, but I noticed, have you ever hear something and you hear it kind of echoed a few times?
Yeah.
I've heard quite a few people who I haven't seen, and they're like, "Oh, Catherine, you're so busy, so
Mm,
busy." And I was like, I don't want to be known for being busy.
right.
Um, so, and I think sometimes I do give off that perception. I don't want to. But honestly, my kids are at an age when COVID hit, their schedule was packed before COVID. They were in so many things. And then when all the bans were lifted and it was time
Yeah.
to register them for everything again, they're like, please don't. It felt horrible. They're like, we just want to be at peace. And you know what? You still have to be in. I was like, well, we can do things as a family.
Yeah.
So passions, honestly, just again, I don't want to sign up for too much. I like going with like what feels good at the moment, and really spending more time in nature and with the
Yeah.
kids and integrating that all together is so important to me. I know we go on hikes and just walks, and it's so interesting because that's when you hear there's no screens, nobody's on their phones, and you get to hear their thoughts and what they're thinking about the world and their little personalities.
Yeah.
Just really spending more quality time, even if it's not doing something big, that's big for me. And honestly, working out, I love working out. I'm typically more of a high intensity. If
Yeah.
I didn't sweat and my heart rate wasn't near the max, it wasn't a good workout. And my body lately kind of tells me that's not for me anymore. So
Mm.
I've been learning Pilates and yoga,
Oh,
and
nice.
it just feels more aligned with where I am right now, and it kind of feels right for my body. So leaning into that a bit more, although I really, this is going to sound a little contradictory to that, but I really have had an inkling to learn jujitsu. So
Yeah.
it's on my list. I have not gone to any classes, but I would love to do that. That's
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a season of connection, really, both like with your family, with nature, with friends, and then also with yourself. I don't do jujitsu either, but my interpretation of it is that it's really you connect with yourself,
okay. Yeah,
right? You learn your body, you learn that you know, you're helpless in a lot of situations when you're not trained for it, right? But then you
exactly.
also learn new ways around it and all these things. So it's kind of that it's from what I'm hearing, it's a time of reconnection and new connection, really.
I think that is a good word to use as like an all-encompassing umbrella of what
Mm,
is happening. Yeah, new connection and just being in tune
yeah.
um with yeah, my circle who's around me. Being more mindful of how I spend my time, what I do with my body, like exercise wise,
Mm.
who is in your circle, who is around you, who you get to spend time with. Um, yeah, just being more mindful of it.
I'm curious, like I believe we all have natural gifts that we bring into the world. And yeah, like I'd love to hear what you feel some of yours are.
Ooh, um, I think, well, I don't think I know. I do very well in crisis situations. For
Sure.
some reason,
Adrenaline.
the higher the chaos, the calmer I am, and the
Mm,
more I'm able to really see and evaluate a situation for what it is. Um, which I know managing at Joe Cool's, when you're babysitting 500 intoxicated adults, problems can arise. And it was always managing there was one of my favorite things.
right.
It was just you roll with the punches, and there definitely were punches, and I really loved that. I always have done well at that. Even our baseball team, a
Mm,
bystander had a biking accident, and it was just like right away everything comes together. I'm like, oh, this is what we do. You do this, you do this. It just clicks. But I also find um I'm just most of the time pretty energetic.
yeah.
And it seems to be a common theme. People say that I bring a good energy to things, and I do
Right.
love connecting with people. love connecting with you. I love meeting people.
Hmm.
And not love it, but I like hearing about their stories, and that's a natural that is a skill that not everybody has, right?
For sure.
Skills that I would like to be better at could be organization, and there's a
Right.
list of those, but natural, just being able to talk to anyone,
It's funny you mentioned that too, because as you said, one perception of you is that you're always busy, but I mean, and I completely agree with the other one that you just mentioned is that you're also very accessible in the sense that you're super easy to talk to. You're very friendly and approachable and very welcoming and warm versus this kind of contrasting sense of busyness. It's like, well, Catherine's never around. She's always busy. Like,
yeah.
also, I mean, my perception of you is that you're a busy person. You have a lot of hats that you wear, and that's just the case. Not to say you don't have time, right? To me, that's a different conversation.
And I
But
wonder too,
yeah.
I wonder there if it kind of it depends on how we've connected in the past. Like you and I have talked, and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, we've talked about business stuff, and I'm like, oh, we'll talk about that. And I know we've always been able to bounce ideas off each other, so we kind of opened those doors.
Right.
Where I wonder with people who maybe we haven't connected like that, if that's almost a threshold. If we've connected, you
Right.
realize I'm accessible, that I want to talk to everyone. But if we haven't, maybe they just are like, oh, too busy. But I think again that goes to
That's
I think
boundaries.
yeah, but also I think people get a lot of anxiety about reaching out to people. Everyone's
Mm,
scared of the fear of rejection.
sure.
Um and in my industry, I kind of compare it to I was talking to someone, sorry, I might as well back up. I was talking to
Yeah.
someone about working a home show with a builder because I recently went and sat with the builder himself, not I was invited by the real estate agent who typically sells it. And we
Right.
started talking, and he started just asking questions. And for me in the mortgage industry, I think they're pretty scenarios that most people would know, but really they're not. I don't know how to build a house. So just because we're all in real estate, I don't know anything about construction. So why are these we don't know everything about everyone's industry. So
Mm,
he was excited because he said, I learned so much that I think could potentially break down barriers people think they have that maybe they don't have about buying a new house in today's market. Because a lot of people don't realize they can take their low interest rate and bring it to a new house. They can still get more money. Lots of scenarios. And I said, a lot of people say, okay, well, if you have a mortgage question, just call the mortgage broker.
right.
But remember before when gyms didn't advertise their prices and you had to go in to get a gym membership, but you had to do the sales pitch first
Yeah.
and they've already like dissected you. So many people are afraid of that first step. They don't want to call the bank because one, is the person going to be nice? Are they going to be friendly?
Mm.
Are they going to answer my question without making me give them an application? If
Yeah.
they
Or am I
give
going to feel dumb? Like I don't want to be vulnerable there either, right? Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, and so I don't know how to start.
100%. So, I hope that I can continue to let people know that I am approachable. I hope other people in the financial industry continue to do that as well.
Hmm.
Because again, it's such a core piece of people's success and their stress levels. Financial stress is typically the number one source of stress people have.
Sure.
And really, knowledge is power. So the more we can share the knowledge we have and empower others around us, everyone's going to just feel a bit more in control. They're making a bit better decisions, but I hope I hope to do a better job at making sure people know I'm approachable and accessible, even if it comes off that I'm busy. Because one, I want to connect with people. I don't care if you want a mortgage or don't want a mortgage. I want to
Right.
know about you. I love being able to connect with people. But two, especially if it's about someone does have a question, I hope they come and ask because there are no dumb questions. I ask all the questions about
Yeah.
everything.
Sure.
So I think that's I hope I can do a better job and continue to do that.
Well, I think you're doing a great job, first of
Oh,
all.
thanks. Thanks.
Kind of on that similar breath, other than yourself, who are some of your favorite accounts or podcasts to follow for information like in the housing market or in that space to kind of stay current or for other suggestions in terms of financial advice and things like that?
Um, if there's a few, um, there is Miss Money and Math. She is on Instagram. Her target reach is women.
Hmm.
Typically, 2/3 of women will either become divorced or widowed. So there is a strong chance you are going to outlive or
Yeah,
become single at some point. But the amount of financial literacy that women have is still very low compared to that of men.
sure.
Um, so there's a good chance you're going to end up on your own without the tools you need to be okay financially. So she really helps there. She breaks down investing, she breaks down budgeting.
Mm.
Um, we've become friends, Instagram friends.
Yeah, cool.
I really like that, but I think even if you're not a female or a woman, I think the information itself is the same and it's great. Um, Monica Chestnut, she's a local insurance broker. She puts out a lot of great content about budgeting, insurance. Um, for me, it's whoever's the most easy to digest is
Yeah.
probably the one that's going to resonate with the most people. Um, they're great. There is a gentleman, Ron Butler. He is a mortgage broker. He heads up a very large firm in Toronto,
Mm.
and he's very blunt. I think his podcast is called the Angry Broker Podcast.
Oh, nice.
And Ron's been in the industry for quite some time, so he's less likely to give you the cheery, optimistic what you want to hear,
Yeah.
and he's going to tell you more where it's at. I follow Ron on Twitter. I think it's called X now. And I find he's great on there.
Mm.
Um, and just easy to consume. Those would be my biggest ones I
Yeah,
follow.
cool.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't, it's not a space that I know much about at all. So even just for myself, in terms of like, who are some people who aren't going to turn me away from it in terms of like, this is over my head and I don't digest it at all. So that's
They're
perfect.
actually, sorry, one more, and I believe they're best on Facebook.
Mm.
His name is Richard Moxley, and he was a mortgage broker who realized the credit issues, like the lack of credit knowledge and literacy
Yeah.
that was out there. So he has what's called the credit game. He has a book. Honestly, I think the book's $10. I bought 10 copies and gave most of them away already. Um, the book, every Canadian should read it. Honestly, they should make this mandatory in high
Cool.
school.
Yeah.
It puts how to play the credit game in really easy terms, all the secrets, all the tricks. It's so short. He does have very affordable courses or credit repair packages where he's not going to try to sell you into credit counseling. He's going to
Right.
just give you the knowledge and how to do it. So if the credit game, and I believe they put lots of tips on their Facebook page too. So
Okay.
that was always a good one.
No, that's great. That's, I mean, that's a lot of options. I was thinking maybe I get one. That's four.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love podcasts so much.
Well, and I guess that's perfect transition into my closing question. Uh, they say that what has got you to where you are isn't what's going to get you to where you want to go. And so with that, I'd love to hear about how your internal dialogue has been shifting lately and how you see it shaping into this next season of life for you.
I think, I think if we're being fully transparent, I think there was um a lot of ego driving me for a little while there, which I've
Mm.
tried to nip in the butt and take that away because I don't ever like that. Like I never want to um succeed. I was in a brokerage where it was very important what your numbers were, what
Mm.
your achievement levels were. And it really only counted by numbers, not success stories or families you helped.
Right.
So I'm glad I have moved to a different avenue that's more aligned with really slowing down, even if it means doing less transactions, but more meaningful, making
Yeah.
sure I connect with families. So I give them all the full picture because COVID really did move us all online. So you don't always meet people, you don't get to go through that full, conversation, maybe pick up on some cues of ways you could help them,
Yeah.
that isn't as easy to do through email or phone calls. But I really think just again, that connection that you said, just
Yeah.
connecting with people, I think is going to shift me into a more authentic way of helping clients and also helping and being with friends and family. And I think it will naturally move that car into something that's a bit more meaningful for me
Yeah.
by just enhancing those connections. I love my job, I love my career, I love my life,
Mm.
and just being able to um, further enhance what I do in a more meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, and I guess two things come to mind immediately. It sounds like you're shifting sort of out of a more masculine energy and leaning into a more feminine energy. Well,
Definitely
also,
it was on my research this
right,
year.
leading into being a more authentic version of yourself,
100%.
right? And so the yin and the yang and the you, and that's just you're navigating
Honestly,
that pendulum a little bit.
um, just to kind of continue on that, the feminine energy and the masculine energy, I think I really lived in my masculine energy for a
Yeah.
little while. I don't think it was by choice, but you can shift there if you're in what you feel is not a safe environment for you to like be your feminine self.
Hmm.
Um, but I also think our mental state, our world, our environment is so much more connected with our physical bodies than I thought. And I started presenting some symptoms that we couldn't diagnose, and they were actually really scaring me. It affected my vision, which I need my vision to work.
Yeah.
Um, and we were working with a naturopath, which she is incredible, but she really highlighted how, what we choose to do, the situations we choose to put ourselves in, they can dictate kind of our hormone levels. Are we in a state of fight or flight all the time?
Yeah.
How is our parasympathetic nervous system working? And but we have a lot of control over those things. And I think when you are doing things that are more aligned with maybe your values so they feel right. Or you're going with that intuition. You're doing things that are right for you instead of just what society expects or what
Yeah.
you think you should do. When you're doing things that are aligned with you, you're not only going to thrive mentally, but physically you will. Honestly, my body composition changed fully this year, which was so strange. It was a very weird side effect for the
Right.
activities that changed. I really wasn't anticipating that, but it was in a good way too.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just going to continue focusing again, being more in tune with myself. And I hope others do if anyone's feeling stressed, and you have an ability to control it and maybe just lean into what your body wants and what is good for you mentally. Because I know for myself, physically, it helps my health so much. And again, that goes into being afraid of, well, being aware of death and aging and
Yeah.
just taking care of your body is more important to me. So,
Yeah. And quality of life, that's quantity versus quality is, well, it's an equation, right? It's you can have a hell of a life. It can also be very short,
yes,
or or it can be very long. And then it's anyways, just being aware of that and how your decisions do actually impact. And not only that, I feel as you mentioned alignment a lot, it's as you become more aligned yourself, you will attract more people who are aligned with you, right? You can't connect with someone truly when we're not being our authentic self. It becomes
100%.
very difficult. And then we wonder why it's stressful and why we don't feel like connected. Like, well, we're not
100%.
leaning into ourselves. We're leaning into these stories that society says we should, and then it feels weird. It's
Yeah.
like, well, no doubt, right?
Yeah.
Of course it does.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, and that's to go, I guess, to go full circle again. The expansion is coming and it's here.
That's right. Let's go.
Yeah.
See
So how
what
do people get a hold of you if they want to have any questions, or what's the best way for people to reach out if they want to get
um
talking with you?
I if they're interested in following content, I put most of the content on Instagram, and
Hmm.
easily you can message me on there. I'll definitely message back. Um, if they want to, if you haven't impeding question, you want to reach out, my email is Catherine@villagemortgage.ca, and I will definitely get back
Sure.
to you and give you a call. Or even if it's not mortgages, if it's something slight financial, I'm happy
Hmm.
to help or even just steer you in the direction, because financial titles and all the different roles, they're not always clear on what services everyone provides.
Hmm.
So sometimes it's nice to have someone who can really just give you a nudge in the right direction, right?
Yeah. Well, I can attest to that. You've sent me a long list of resources for various different things, and
I'm big on
it,
checklists.
well, yeah, and you're very good at it, right? And so sometimes those tasks can feel daunting, and it's like I don't want to put somebody out, but literally within 5 minutes, you accumulated a whole list for me and sent it to me. And now this would have taken me literally days if I ever got it done,
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
It's well, same. And honestly, like there's resources and knowledge you have that I know we've talked about. There's lots of knowledge you have
sure.
that I think everybody has their pockets of interest that they have researched, and you don't have to start over. You don't have to research it. Lean on other people.
Hmm.
That's the beauty of community, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's, yeah, to tie things together perfectly. I appreciate you coming on because it's for
Sure.
that very reason, right? It's you have a zone of genius that is not mine. And I'd love to just talk to you about it and share it with anybody that wants to listen. So
I appreciate just getting to chat with you. So